Hi everyone, it's the EnglishSimmer here, and this video is brought to you through the EA Creator Network. Also, the clips of the game that I use in this video aren't actually the final software, but I wanted to sit down, kind of go through my thoughts, feelings, opinions, and also just my summary of like what I got from playing. I usually like to do this when a new expansion is coming out or a new game pack is coming out and talk about kind of where I find the replayability, what kind of people I think this is going to be interesting to. Do I feel like this pack should be an expansion pack? The end of the day, you're going to get the most replayability from your noggin, from your imagination. Yes, I know, I'm so used to saying that when it comes to The Sims 4. A lot of The Sims 4 does tend to hinge on the player kind of having imagination and having a storyline already set up. Sims 4 doesn't particularly like push you into one storyline or another. It's very much like, oh, this is what you're trying to do. Okay, here are the tools to kind of do that, and then we're just going to take a kind of hands-off approach and you can explore that yourself. And that's definitely how this pack feels. It absolutely expands on hobbies that we have already in the game. Obviously, you can now run classes, you can do paid and unpaid mentoring, you can learn skills in new ways, you can do that as a customer, so you can literally just like go to a business, you can ask them to run a class, and that does build up your skill quite quickly because you're kind of doing a hands-on activity with someone who is guiding you. If you get a gold in that event whilst you are actually attending the class, then that means that the skill that you were focused on is actually boosted. The skill gain is boosted for a couple of hours after that class ends. And then the businesses hinge on your imagination and really you as a player kind of figuring out the best use of the business system to get the results that you want. For example, in my gameplay overview, right at the very end, I was testing if we could kind of run a babysitting or a daycare, and you can, but don't get me wrong, there are absolutely limitations. For example, you can't see your customers' wants or needs, kind of just have to have food available to them if they do happen to get hungry. I guess with toddlers and infants, you do actually have the option of being able to see like when they need their nappy changed or when they actually need to be bathed. I have my little nursery set to an hourly rate, but that did mean that my Sims could just like despawn. At any given moment, they could just get a little house with an arrow in their thinking bubble, and then they would just disappear off the lot into nothingness. The caregivers didn't kind of come back to the business to pick them up to then walk back out. They just disappeared off the lot without a trace, which was a little scary. So there's not really a realism there, and that's kind of what I talk about when it comes to limitations of certain things. Like your imagination can only really take you so far, depending on how the game then wants to run with what you've set up. I also do think I would have appreciated, and maybe they didn't include this because I think this is actually a thing that you can do in vets. I'm not too sure if this is a thing that you can do and get to work, but I want to say that it is. But on the kind of podiums that you have to have in those other packs, you can actually disallow new customers. So if you don't want them to be waiting for too long and you kind of are just like, hey, there's 3 or 4 people waiting here like that I'm running this business about, that I'm interacting with, and that's all I really want up until now because I don't want to start getting those bad reviews. Unfortunately, that is not a thing in small businesses, which I do think is a little weird because I definitely felt like my businesses were sometimes being completely overwhelmed. If you're doing an hourly type service and you're not really making too much money, which I definitely noticed in my babysitting one because it costs like 75 simoleons to open, sometimes you will obviously lose money, especially if it is a lower ranking where you're not being paid as much or you can't really like boost your sales. It could be quite nice to have a bunch of customers, but I wish that I could have just kept it to maybe like 2 or 3 children and I could have disallowed new customers. I also would have appreciated if I could have set like a time for customers to stay in the lot, just kind of giving players more customizability and more tools within their game to actually back up the ideas that they had and could actually make businesses just flow a lot better. I would always suggest building a bigger business than you see necessary because Sims will crowd and they will crowd fast. And then that also means that things fly off your shelves really, really quickly. There is no real challenge in selling things in this pack. If an object is placed on a shelf, then it's very likely that customers will buy it, especially if it's a higher quality item. I felt like I was having to restock my pottery, for example, like every 4 hours potentially. I'd have to kind of close my business, make a load of more pottery to then put on the shelves, and then open for like another 4 hours and then shut it again. I never ever felt like it was a challenge to earn money, apart from in that like babysitting career, and honestly maybe also in cafes, because those aren't high selling items, you know, like sweets on the new candy machine, coffee, drinks. That is not where you're gonna make your money in this pack. So that actually could be quite a challenge. There's really no challenge in the new hobbies. I kind of wish it worked like The Sims 2 and also Get to Work, where your customers kind of had that bar above their heads that gave you the information of whether they were interested in something. I just think that allows you to take your time a little bit more. It kind of feels a little bit more realistic. On that note, and I know I've got a couple of comments about this, maybe I just wasn't playing it right, but you can sell the stuff that your employees make if you are mentoring them, and you can also sell the stuff that your customers make, but you have to kind of go through a loophole to get to it. So you have to mentor them for them to actually sit and make something. And then with their craftables, I don't know if you can glaze customers. I do know that if you enter build buy mode and you go onto the ones that your employees have made, you can actually plop them onto the glazing bench, I'm fairly sure, but don't quote me on this. And then you can glaze it, and then you can hop again back into build and buy mode, and then you can use build and buy mode to override the dragging and put it onto a shelf where you can sell it. But I wish that you could honestly just like click and drag stuff very easily. I wish you didn't have to manually go into like build buy mode. Again, maybe I was just playing with that wrong. Maybe I was just making it much harder than it intended to be, but you can't instruct your employee, for example, to do pottery, which again kind of makes the restocking a lot harder, because there's also not a restocking sign the way that there is in Get to Work. It's very much like you have to put in the work, put in the hours to make those items and then put them back on the shelves, which I get, because this is businesses and hobbies. Like, they want you to focus on the making part of it as much as you do on the selling part of it. I did feel like a fair few of the employee activities that you can have them do feel slightly overpowered. There are some that they will just prefer to do over others. For example, in my babysitting, I noticed that Vivian wanted to cook and like bake cakes a lot more than she wanted to actually take care of the needs and like look after the little ones, which definitely felt weird. I do kind of wish that there was a priority. I wish that maybe the order that you applied them to your employees, say if I had take care of little ones at the front, then that would be her first priority. Lectures, I also thought were very heavily prioritized by my employee. My employee just always wanted to use the whiteboard and give lectures. So I do think it is down to the player to kind of play around with those employee tasks and maybe try and find what does and doesn't work for you. But I do wish that a couple of them got nerfed. I wish they were a bit more balanced. I didn't really test this or play around with this idea too much, but someone left a comment in one of my videos saying, I wonder if you could have basically two businesses in one, not obviously like owning a second business, because that's not a possibility. Only one sim can have one small business at a time, but they had the idea of a cafe during the day and then a lounge/nightclub at night. And I would be interested to see if you had both of those objects kind of on your lot. You had a bar and then also a cafe bar. If during the daytime hours you had your employees maybe run that little cafe bar and they were like serving drinks and you would have your customers read and stuff, but then in the evening you actually remove those employee tasks and the customer activity and change them for maybe the drinks bar and then also dancing, you know, performing, listening to music. Would the game actually pick up on that change if you were playing in one business shift? I'm definitely gonna play around with that and let you all know. Whilst I do feel like businesses are the biggest replay value, because I'm sure when we get our hands on this pack with all the other packs installed, there's gonna be a ton of like cross pack that you can actually take part in. You can have as customer activities, you can have employment activities, abilities from other packs. I personally, and I know a ton of you, would also get more replay value out of this pack if a sim didn't physically have to own a small business. Now again, I'm putting a big old asterisk next to this. I tried to test this out in my early access, and I'm like 99% sure you can't have a business that like isn't owned by anyone that actually acts as a business. If you have a small business venue or you have a small business residential that has a podium, that has things set up to work like a business, I'm fairly sure you have to create a family. You have to actually register that business, and then you also have to hire employees. You have to make sure those employees have the correct skills. If you want to run classes and stuff, if you want your Sims to be able to attend as a customer, you need to set everything up in that business in the settings before it is actually considered a business by your game. I'm 99% sure you can't just like have a podium on a lot and then randomly some sim like Panya from For Rent can own that business and you don't actually physically have to set some stuff up and it just opens automatically for you to use as a customer, which I personally wish it did work in that way. I wish that you didn't always have to be the driving force behind those businesses. I kind of understand why it's set up that way rather than residential rentals, because residential rentals really are very basic. They don't really have many rules to them apart from their star rating, whereas businesses, obviously it has all those rules, and I don't think the game would be able to set those up, but I wish it kind of went off the presets. So I wish that if it looked like a gym and it talked like a gym, then it was a gym. I wish there was some way for the game to recognize, oh, these are available, these are the Sims who have a skill high enough to be able to work here. Like, they already have personal trainers assigned to gyms, so why couldn't they have those personal trainers, for example, be the ones who owned gyms, and then you didn't have to waste your time setting it all up. I did realize that in Get to Work, I think you can actually set up all of those things, but then you can sell a retail, for example, and then the retail will continue to work as if someone's not owning it. I am definitely gonna test that out. I'll do it in my cross-pack compatibility video to see if that also works the same way with small businesses. But from my testing, I think you physically have to have a sim own it. You have to change all the settings, and then you can go back to playing another household and use it as if you are a customer. Again, if I'm wrong on that, if you've seen any other content creator be able to get around those rule sets, please do not hesitate to let me know. You won't make me feel silly. I want to know just as badly as you do, because I think more people would use this from a customer point of view if they didn't have to spend the time setting all of that up. Renown is difficult for me because I do feel like it's quite challenging. Renown is the star rating. More renown equals more money and more customers. I probably played for like 3 or 4 sim weeks and the highest I got was a 3-star. I unfortunately wasn't able to test like how hard it is to get a 5-star just because I wasn't really focusing on that. I realized that the rewards for renown weren't really doing too much. It's kind of the same feedback that I gave to eco lifestyle. Whilst it can take a while, at the end of the day, if it's not changing that much, is it really worth your time and energy? I personally felt like alignment did nothing in my game. There was the dreamer and the schemer. Each of those, when you reach the top of it, was like, oh, you might actually disagree with Sims who have an alignment that doesn't match up to yours. If you are dating someone or married to someone who has an alignment that doesn't match yours, there's more likelihood of divorce. I didn't see any consequences from that in my gameplay. I didn't notice Sims squabbling more frequently than I'm used to. There were a couple of times where it's like people are growing more knowledgeable about the exploits that you're running in your nefarious business, but then all my sim got from it was a moodlet. Therefore, in my opinion, doesn't particularly add replay value. I've said this from the beginning, from the opening trailer that we saw, but I definitely think having more hobbies would have obviously added more replayability. I do think there is replayability in tattooing especially, because obviously you are able to give custom tattoos, you are able to draw on Sims, you are able to download tattoos from the gallery, and I think all of that kind of adds replayability. I like that you can have dedication tattoos, even though they don't really have any effect in the game whatsoever. It's just nice for storytelling. I do wish that there was a new death if you got infected tattoos. No new deaths and no new woohoos was honestly slightly a missed opportunity for me. I think this could have been the perfect time to maybe give us a few more arcade machines and have your Sims be able to run full-blown arcades or a comic book store, maybe both of those wrapped in together, hairdressing, either setting up your own salon in your home or as a small business venue, or being able to travel around and kind of mentor other Sims in their homes. And then we got bike parts as a new collection. It kind of feels like you should be able to do something with those bike parts. I actually didn't finish it, but you can put those all up on your wall and it kind of tells you a story through the dialogue. But I do think it would have been cool if they had given us metal sculpting or metal work where you could kind of build like scrap sculptures. A couple more hobbies, and especially hobbies for children, would have pushed that for me. Kids can actually learn the pottery skill. They can't use the new pottery wheel, but they can use the lump of clay that we have in the Sims 4 base game, and that gets up the skill. I've always spoken about really wanting a hobbies pack, and I do think they could have added way more replayability outside of the businesses when it comes to hobbies by giving us talents or untalented Sims. I've always stated that I would love if your Sim could be untalented in cooking, for example, and they always just stayed at like a level 3 at cooking. Like no matter how hard you tried, or Gain was just really slow in that skill if they were untalented at something. Because then that would increase like more fires, it would increase more things going wrong, it would feel like a struggle for your Sims, it would add challenge and consequence. They do have likes and dislikes of those hobby activities that you can choose in Create a Sim or choose from those pop-ups, but I feel like that doesn't affect like how quickly or slowly they gain a skill at all. They obviously lose fun if they don't like something, and they gain fun at an accelerated rate if they do like something. The hobby meetups just practically work like a mini festival, and a lot of the time I felt like they were quite empty. Some of them, don't get me wrong, there were a fair few Sims. I realized that the creative one, because there's a lot of creative Sims in the new world and also in the base game world, that was probably the most full. But they do just randomly disappear like the city living ones. So if you are working on a project, say on the pottery wheel, and then it closes, that item will just disappear. It won't be put into your inventory or anything like that. I much would have preferred if it kind of worked like The Sims 2, where you could have hobby magazines. Those magazines were kind of split up into interests. You know, the 5 like skill things that they have in The Sims 4, you could have those as interests, but then you were kind of learning different hobbies and skills depending on what packs you had and kind of what the edition of the magazine actually was focused on for that week. I think that would have been really cool. I also think that could have tied in with arcades and a magazine shop business or a comic book business. That personally would have added way more personality and way more kind of consequence to actually enjoying something or not enjoying something, and it would have felt more fleshed out in that hobbies part of this expansion. I actually think over the weekend I'm gonna react to a video that I filmed back in 2019 going over we need more stuff for our Sims to do that was fully focused on hobbies, and I kind of want to see what we did get and what we didn't get out of a pack that apparently was focused on hobbies. Growing your Sims interests in different categories could then maybe have unlocked different stuff or given you the opportunity to enter competitions. There's a ton of things they could have added as rewards. I could make a full follow-up video to this, kind of expanding upon that idea. And then just for a couple more miscellaneous stuff that I really felt was a little like, ooh, whilst I was playing. And one of those was classes. You're only allowed to do classes actually on your business lot. Obviously, you have to have a whiteboard. You have to have 3 of the skill building activities around you. But I couldn't, for example, go to a community center if you have Growing Together and actually host a class there, even though I could have set set the rooms up perfectly for someone to be able to run a class there unless they actually own that community center as a small business venue. During editing just now, I have actually realized that I only tested that on another open business. So I'm now thinking, if a lot is just a standard lot and it's not actually set up to be a small business venue, can I then go to it and teach class? Because technically that money wouldn't be going to anyone else. I will obviously test that and probably delete this portion of the video if that is a possibility. And if it is a possibility, thank you, Sims team. If you happen to see this video before I edit this part out, I do apologize for dragging you. But you know, there's an awful lot of what if I did this or what if I did that to see if things do work the way that I kind of would want them to work. I don't know why it couldn't work like tipping, for example, where Sims could just give you money if you weren't on your business lot and you were hosting a class. I think if you have the correct skills and you have the correct items, you should be able to host a class anywhere. The only thing that you can do off a business lot is actually lecturing, but lecturing is completely unpaid. And also on that note, the whiteboards that are actually in this game aren't movable. So you actually physically have to go into those lots that you want a whiteboard on in manage worlds and build by mode and add one of those new whiteboards. You can't just pop it in your inventory and then give a lecture anywhere in the world, which in my opinion, the trailer made it seem like you could do that. I also kind of would have liked lecturer as maybe a freelancer job if they were going to go down that route of it being completely unpaid, because imagine if you could just have gigs of like, hey, we need a lecturer for like this skill. Do you mind coming to this lot with a whiteboard? And then you can do a lecture on that thing and then you actually got paid for it. I know that they probably didn't give us like any new careers in this pack because they were like, we want you to focus on building your own business with like all these other packs and activities that you might have. And I think again, maybe it would have encouraged you to kind of step out of your comfort zone. Maybe if they needed a lecturer for a certain skill that maybe you didn't have, you could have a couple of days kind of like the acting career to get up your skill to a level where you could host a lecture. Maybe if they had done lectures as a level 3 type thing instead of a level 5, but then if you were level 3 it was a poor lecture so you didn't get paid as much. If you were a level 5 or 6 then you got paid slightly better, and then at level 9, 10 you got the most that you could have been paid because it was a really good lecture. When it comes to skill mastery and family recipes was honestly a really nice surprise for this pack. It was something that I wasn't expecting, but I do feel like it adds at least a little bit of replayability because those family recipes and the special touches are actually formed by things that your sim gets up to in their life. So you actually need to experience the game, you need to be playing to unlock those, and I do think the combination of those does add a little bit of replayability because you're not going to get every skill mastery perk. I'm fairly sure Sims can only have 4 anyway. Just being able to have different variations of those kind of encourages you to play, again, maybe outside of your comfort zone with skills that you're not usually used to playing. And I do like when the game encourages you to do that. Ooh, I feel like I haven't taken a breath this whole video. That was quite a long one for like a replayability video. I feel like they're not usually quite so long. I think I'm also finding it a little bit harder because I do think so much of this pack is going to be reliant on what you can and can't do when it comes to cross-pack compatibility, and also the limitations of stuff that maybe you feel like you should be able to do that perhaps you can't, which, speaking of that, I am hoping on Sunday to actually have my cross compatibility, exploring how Businesses and Hobbies actually works with other stuff. I recently just put up a post on my community page. I'll actually try and link that down below in the description if you want to go leave any questions you might have, queries about how things can actually interact with each other. I would love to know what you lot think of this pack. I'm sorry if maybe in this video I didn't go over too much about what you were interested in, but I do have a full Creator Sim overview, World and Townies overview, and also a gameplay overview where I go into much more detail about what you can do in this pack, less about its kind of limitations that I spoke about in this video. Also, I do want to state the time that I get with a hands-on of a pack is obviously only base game and the pack itself, and it's also a limited amount of time. I'm not a quality analysis person. I'm not a game tester. I do flag the issues that I run into, things that I feel are unpolished or aren't really working the way that I expect them to. But I've had questions recently about, are there any catastrophic bugs? Did you see anything that makes this pack unplayable? And unfortunately, the real answer is I didn't. Everyone's gonna react to certain issues like differently depending on how much you play with them. And I think a lot of this is brought up by the error 801-800 glitch that came and is kind of exacerbated by For Rent. I don't have the luxury of playing with all of the packs to kind of see what causes those issues. And that big issue came, what, like 2 years down the line? If bugs do occur, I will try my best to like talk about them over on my community page, or if it's something really serious, I do make videos about it, or I'll talk about it over on my Blue Sky. I have seen those comments at an increased rate, and I understand why they're happening. Like, it's frustrating when you spend your money on something that doesn't work the way that you want it to or that you expect it to. And I do think that a lot of major bugs right now are taking a while to be dealt with, which I fully understand that these things take time. They need to investigate stuff, but I also do think that there needs to be kind of more clarity, like as they are like ongoing, like trying to fix these things. I do think that just more open communication about those types of really severe glitches would be appreciated. I honestly think my biggest advice for this pack, and especially if you are one of those people who's like, I'm genuinely worried to play my game right now, is don't buy it on release. Obviously, this is quite a big system, and when we get big systems, there is a trend currently of those systems breaking other things in our game. I think if I weren't doing this as my job, if this wasn't my career, if I didn't want to cover packs and kind of be a person for information for you lot to, you know, have that pack in my game and explore different things and see how things work so that you lot knew how it was, I would hold off on buying it. I would want to see how creative other players could be with it, if the ideas that I actually wanted to do for businesses would actually work with the limitations and kind of the boundaries of this pack. I would want to see how it worked in other people's games before I personally got my hands on it, because I do think it is one of those packs that is quite personal to how you play. Whilst it does expand the game and hobbies that we have, it might not do everything that you want it to do. It might not be capable of all the things that you want it to be able to do. And also, for example, you might not be able to suspend your belief when toddlers and infants are just disappearing off your lot when you're trying to run a daycare. Even though I'm not feeling super confident in how this video went, I hope it was helpful for you lot. I would love to hear all of your thoughts and opinions in this pack down below. Definitely leave your cross-pack compatibility questions over on my community post, and I will speak to you all in my next one. Bye now.